I'm not much of a writer, so forgive me if this sounds awkward, but I am freaking out right now. I can't contact my family or any of my friends or the police, which I'll explain later, so I honestly don't know where else I could go for help except here. I'm going to go by an alias, if you don't mind. After everything that's happened, I'm a little paranoid. For the purpose of this story, you guys can call me Libby. I've always thought that name was cute. Anyways, let me start from the beginning. I got really into Overwatch a couple years back, and it was on Overwatch that I met Cassidy. We hit it off immediately and became fast friends. She wasn't the kind of girl you'd expect to spend her days playing video games. She was beautiful and rich and had a plethora of friends. I'd scroll through my Instagram feed and see pictures of her with a bunch of other equally beautiful girls in Gucci swimsuits sipping Dom Perignon by an enormous above-ground pool, or her at some swanky country club with her ridiculously hot boyfriend dressed in some fabulous Valentino dress. She definitely wasn't the kind of girl who became friends with me, and yet she did. I was an average, boring girl with maybe 3 other friends and no social life, but she chose me to befriend. She chose to make me special. She'd text me every day and tell me all about her life. I knew which of her friends was being problematic at the moment or which girl was trying to sleep with her boyfriend. It was me she came to at night in tears when she couldn't sleep because she felt worthless. She was the one who stayed up with me on FaceTime when I had a panic attack at a party, even though she had finals the next day. She was the one who encouraged me every day and made me feel loved. So when she invited me to come stay with her for the summer, I eagerly accepted. My parents were a little wary at first, but once they met and spoke to Cassidy and her parents over the phone, they agreed to let me go. I was over the moon about it. I'd just finished my sophomore year of high school, and all I wanted was to be several states away, having a blast with my favorite friend. Cassidy lived in a little town called Salvation Rock in Arkansas. It was one of those one-stoplight tiny towns where everyone knew everyone. The only radical difference between Salvation Rock and all the other small towns just like it was that Salvation Rock's residents were rich. Filthy rich. I assumed it was probably from old money, but I always thought it might be crass of me to ask Cassidy. Anyways, when I got to the airport in Arkansas, Cassidy was waiting for me with a huge smile on her face and her arms spread wide. I was so excited to see her in person for the first time. She was just as beautiful in person as she was over FaceTime, with long, flowing blonde hair and sparkling green eyes. She raced towards me and wrapped me in a hug so tight my ribs hurt. I describe this because I genuinely don't believe that anything strange going on here is Cassidy's fault, and I want you guys to see that she's been the truest friend to me for so long. Anyways, Cassidy brought her friends because she thought we could get a bite to eat on the way back to Salvation Rock. They were all just as beautiful as Cassidy, and I was so scared they would hate me, but they seemed excited to meet me. There was Olivia, her girlfriend Megan, and Cassidy's boyfriend Sean. They were all so nice to me, and I honestly felt very welcome. Cassidy had told me all about these people, so it was easy to jump right in and talk to them. Our friend Bethany's gonna meet us at the restaurant, but you'll love her too, Cassidy said to me as we walked up to her BMW convertible parked outside. I'd heard all about Bethany, and she seemed like the queen bee of the group. I was suddenly very nervous again. Bethany was waiting for us when we got to the restaurant, sitting at a table and sipping an iced tea. She appraised me coolly, and I felt the flash of nerves well up again in my stomach. "So this is Libby?" Bethany asked in a flat voice as we sat down. Ouch. Next to me, Cassidy's grip on my arm tightened and her smile turned wooden. The others in the group also stood tense, as if Bethany was a judge in a courthouse ready to proclaim me guilty. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Bethany finally said. "Sit down." The tension in the atmosphere relaxed a bit, but it was still very much present. Bethany grilled me with questions, but not the kind of icebreaker questions you're thinking of. She asked me things like, if your mom and 5 million people were all going to burn in a fire and you could only save your mom or the people, who would you save? And if you were a doctor and you could save 5 patients from dying, but you had to do it by killing another patient, what would you do? Clearly very weird questions for our first meeting. I could see Cassidy's hands shake every time Bethany asked a question, and I couldn't tell if I was doing well or not. This seemed like some really vague moral theology test that I desperately wanted to pass. At the end of the dinner, Bethany sat back and looked at me for a long while. Everyone else at the table sat there stiffly, eyes flickering between me and Bethany. "Well, I should go. Busy day tomorrow," Bethany said breezily, standing up to leave. The group watched her go in dismay, eyes flickering back to me in pity. "Oh, and Libby?" Bethany said. "I'm having a party tomorrow. You should come." I could finally feel the tension in the room completely deflate. Cassidy's face burst into a smile, and the rest of the group sighed in relief. Yes, it felt like a whole lot of weird. Yes, I didn't think friend groups like this existed outside of movies, but I wanted Cassidy's friends to like me. I wanted to be included, so I didn't think much of it. Once we got to town, however, I realized that what had happened was not insignificant, and more than that, it was just the tip of the iceberg for the weirdness that would come. The first thing I noticed being off was Cassidy's parents. They were waiting at the door when we returned, and I mean literally waiting by the door. As in they were standing directly in front of the door when Cassidy opened it, arms straight by their sides and big smiles plastered across their faces. "Hello, Libby," Cassidy's mother said, smile never wavering, words robotic as if the syllables were programmed and she was a robot just spitting them out. "It is so good to meet you," Cassidy's father said. "Please, come in." Neither of them blinked the entire time. Neither of their smiles wavered once. I had literally talked to them on FaceTime about a week ago when I was convincing my parents to let me stay with them, and they seemed totally normal then. I was completely creeped out, but Cassidy wasn't acting as if anything was different, so I assumed they were just tired and went to bed. Things got weirder from then on. A blasting alarm woke me up at 6:30 a.m. I jolted awake, looking around frantically for the source of the noise. "Don't worry," Cassidy said. "It'll turn off in a sec." She was already getting dressed. "What?" I asked, confused. "The alarm rings all over town at 6:30 a.m., Cassidy said casually. "We have an hour until we have to be out of the house so the police can do their inspection. They come in every morning and check for contraband, drugs, anything satanic, stuff like that." She said this as if it was some kind of normal day-to-day occurrence, and at this point I was getting freaked out. We ate and got dressed, and Cassidy ushered me out of the house at 7:25 a.m. As we left, I saw troops of people in police uniforms lining the sidewalk, all of them wearing opaque black motorcycle helmets. I looked at each of them, trying to discern any facial features behind those masks of black before Cassidy pulled me into the car. "They don't like it when you look at them," she said, starting the ignition. "They might take it as a threat." I said nothing. I didn't know how to reply to that. Cassidy and I basically drove all around town all morning. She said the inspection would take 3 hours. At 10:30 a.m., the whole town congregated at the local park, where there were several picnic tables, and drank tea. The police officers lined all edges of the park, creating a barrier. I asked Cassidy why they were here. "To make sure no one tries to skip tea time, silly." Cassidy giggles as if this was not strange at all. Several women in maids' uniforms came rushing out from a building parallel to the street, pushing carts. One of them approached the table where I sat with Cassidy and her parents, and there was something about her that unnerved me, some quality in her face. It was only after her hands shook while placing a pitcher of tea down that I realized it was fear. "Excuse me," Cassidy said politely to the maid. "Libby here is a guest of mine." The maid simply nodded as she placed down a different pitcher in front of me. "This one's for you," Cassidy said. "I have to drink from this pitcher? What if I want to drink from yours?" I laughed, reaching for her pitcher. "You can't." Cassidy said bluntly and quickly, pulling her pitcher away from me with such force that it rattled the table. I stopped laughing. I mean, Cassidy continued, smile returning to her face, the tea you have is special. It's much nicer than what we get. That's why we save it for guests. I nodded and tried to force a smile. I poured some tea into my little teacup and cautiously sniffed it. It smelled like regular green tea. I took a sip and it seemed to taste all right. I watched as Cassidy and her parents poured their own tea. Their tea was a murky red color, unlike any tea I'd ever seen before. Cassidy's mom stared at her tea with the same unnerving smile she always had on. Cassidy fixed her mother with a stare. "Aren't you going to drink your tea, Mom?" For a split second, her mom's smile faltered, but almost as soon as I noticed it, the smile was back in full force. "Of course, darling," she said in the same peppy, robotic voice as always. But her hands quivered just barely as she brought the cup to her lips. Tea time was over at 11:30, so Cassidy and I hung out at her house. She wasn't acting any different, but everything that happened so far had unnerved me so much that I couldn't make myself relax and have fun. At 1:30 p.m. after lunch, another alarm blared through the town. "That means Mass is starting," Cassidy said, clapping her hands excitedly. I was a little surprised. I knew Cassidy was Christian, but it was a Monday. Oh well, I thought. I wasn't about to judge Cassidy on her religious beliefs, so I let her drive me to the church. The church was an old building, easily hundreds of years old. It looked as if it had never been refurbished once since its building, and the combination of chipping paint and splintering wood gave it an eerie vibe. Now this is the fucking weird part. I've been to Mass before, and I know, goddamn well, this isn't how a Mass goes. The whole service lasted for 4 hours. The only people at the service were teenagers. Cassidy's parents weren't there, and I saw no other adults. Even more oddly than that, the priest was a boy who couldn't have been more than 18. He was decked out in full priest attire, but he didn't even look as if he'd graduated high school. As he came into the church, the congregation fell to their knees, bowing their heads to the floor, and broke out into a Latin hymn. I googled the lyrics later, and this is how they came up on Google Translate. "The Lord has brought mercy to us. He has given his people his land. We offer ourselves to him, for he has saved us from the pits of hell. May all those who do not serve him burn in the deepest depths of hell. May their skin be peeled off and their flesh burned from their bones. May their eyes be eaten by crows and their bones crushed to dust." Kinda dark for a church, right? Then the priest boy started leading us in songs and prayer very similar to that one, all of them with an uncomfortable focus on the punishment of sinners and a weird fixation with the Holy Land being granted to God's people. After about 2 hours, the priest boy fell to his knees, looked up at the sky, and said, "Bow your heads and shut your eyes, children, for the Lord on high comes." Everyone around me knelt again, like we had at the very beginning of the church service, and closed their eyes. Cassidy nudged me urgently with her foot, so I got the hint I was to do the same. "Keep your eyes closed no matter what," Cassidy hissed at me. I nodded. "I mean it," she said harshly. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you feel, no matter what happens, you will keep your eyes closed." "Okay," I said. "Promise me," she urged me. "I promise," I said. "My eyes will stay fully closed." What followed was the scariest moment of my life. First, the priest started chanting. Then the screams came, layering over his robotic chants. The screams were horrible, nowhere close to any screams you heard in the movies. They were howling, screeching screams of pure pain, mixed in with pleading cries and sobs. My stomach turned, and Cassidy must have sensed my resolve fading because she kicked me sharply in the foot. I kept my eyes closed. Then a great wind surged through the church, deafening in noise. It drowned the screams and the priests chanting to a dull roar. And then I could swear I felt hands on my shoulders. I tensed and Cassidy kicked me again. I kept my eyes closed, even as my heart pounded. "Who are you, stranger of my congregation?" My heart stopped. The voice rang clear as day in my head. Inside my head. The voice wasn't deep or high, it wasn't a woman's or a man's voice. I can't describe it, and I hadn't heard it with my ears, it had just appeared in my head like a thought. "My name is Libby," I thought back. "Welcome, Libby," the voice replied to me. "All are welcome here. Repent and receive salvation. All are welcome to receive salvation. Repent or be cast into hell." My heart was pounding in fear at this point. I couldn't even think of anything to say back before the voice disappeared, and with it the wind, the screams, and the priest's chants. "Rise," I heard the priest say. I blinked my eyes open and looked at Cassidy to make sure I was allowed to stand up. I surveyed the room, but everything looked exactly the same as when I had come in. No indication of whether the screams or the wind or the mysterious voice had come from. "Go forth," the priest concluded. "Give thanks to God, for he has chosen us as his people. Go forth and revel in your salvation." I looked at my watch and noticed it was already 5:30. I definitely remember the prayers and songs taking up 2 hours, but there was no way I remember kneeling with my knees closed for more than 5 minutes. Had we really spent 2 hours like that? Anyway, as you can probably tell, I'm beyond unnerved. Even though I have a signal, I've been unable to text anyone or call anyone, including my parents. My phone simply says the call or message has failed. Cassidy's family doesn't have a landline, and I borrowed Cassidy's phones, but I couldn't make any text or calls go through from there either. I've been at Cassidy's house after Mass for a few hours, but I have to go now. Bethany's party starts in half an hour. I'm hoping it'll distract me from all the weirdness going on. I'll see if Bethany has a phone I can use, and I'll update you guys more tomorrow.